Honestly. Uh, and For those of us who weren't here last week when I began this class has three main goals. First, I was asked to share some testimonies and reflections from my training, especially my assignments overseas, and then also try to bring about awareness of how there's so much work to be done everywhere, not just abroad, but also in the places that we live in. Just think about, are there any church members other than your own family in the city that you live in? If not, what about the city next door? If not, what about the county next door, right? If not, what about the state next door or province next door? Actually, when you think about that, that's all work for us to be doing. And then finally, when we recognize this need of the church, I hope that we can resolve and to live and to labor for Jesus Christ, wherever that may be. It might not have to be abroad, and maybe we might not have that opportunity, but that's okay. There's so much that we can do here right at home too. So I already went over a trip to Kenya and Tanzania. Today I'd like to go into the Spanish-speaking countries I went to. And I'd like to start with Argentina. Okay. Has any of us been to Argentina? Only Brother Pablo, who was raised there. Right. Anybody else? Yeah, usually, I don't know about you, but before I went to South America and to Argentina, I never really had a desire to travel there. Right? Maybe it's because they don't really do a lot of advertising, but it seems like when you think about South America, what's the place you want to go to in South America? Amazon, Brazil, Venezuela, okay. Maybe Machu Picchu, right? Machu Picchu? Okay, no, okay. It seems like a lot of South American countries, they need to do more advertising up here in North America is what I'm thinking. But Argentina is, they say it is the bottom of the world. The bottom of the world. And it's because it's in South America, and then it is kind of like a cone-shaped country. And I think it even has parts of Antarctica. I think they have bases in Antarctica too. Okay, and the capital is Buenos Aires, which means good air. And according to what I looked up, there's about 3 million people living in Buenos Aires, and there's a province too called Buenos Aires. It's not the capital, but it's the province surrounding the capital. And there's 15 million people living in the province. And the total population is right around 40 million. So most of the people are living like right here. Right? So often, if you were to go to Buenos Aires, in the capital, they refer to the rest of the country as the interior. Right? So the interior. So a lot of the other places is empty land. Some cities here and there, but fairly empty. And Argentina is kind of like the United States. It's a country that was built on immigration. So in the late 19th century into the early 20th century, there were many Italians and many Spaniards who immigrated. Also other Europeans that immigrated especially to Buenos Aires. And then some of them also went to other places, but most of them just stayed in Buenos Aires. And then in the 1950s, different places from Europe, more like Eastern Europe even, right? And then most recently, it's mostly from people from the surrounding countries like Bolivia, Paraguay, especially those two countries, maybe even Brazilians. And then now there's also some immigration from Asia. Okay, so there's also a Korean community, there's a Chinese community, etc. Now here's a map of Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires, the city itself is marked by this highway. You see this highway? And then there's another road here too. So in a way, it kind of looks like a fan. Yeah? And the governing house of Argentina, like here we call it the White House, but there it's called the Pink House because it's pink. And then it's right over here. So the city and Congress is like right over here. Right? So basically most of the governmental offices and the downtown area is all the way here near the river. This is a river which feeds into the ocean, a very wide river. Right? And then everything else kind of fans out into the rest of the city. Right? Okay. Now the church in Argentina, you could say, began in the early 1980s when there were some immigrants from Taiwan who were TJC members. Right? And at first there were only like one family, two families, but slowly over that decade, the 1980s, there eventually was a small group of maybe 20 members. And I think officially on our IA website, the Argentina church was established in 1989. Okay. And so at first it was just a small group, mostly of Taiwanese members. But then in the last, especially like 10 years, many families have been immigrating from mainland China. These are our members. So now we still have only one church and then another worship location, but there's almost 600 members on the record in Buenos Aires. And this is what the church building looks like. Right? Actually, if we go back to this map, like I said, this is the downtown area. Our church is pretty central. It's over here in a neighborhood called Caballito, which means little horse. And the location is pretty convenient. It's okay. Yeah, it's pretty convenient by public transportation. Even some people take the train there. Right? And one of the things when you go to Buenos Aires is you'll see that there's a lot of graffiti all around the city. And our church is not the exception. So there's some graffiti on our church, but like right now, during the spiritual convocation they're holding there, I think a couple weeks earlier, they were painting everything again, just to keep it clean. But after a few weeks, it's going to be back to a lot of graffiti. So I like to say that our church there in Buenos Aires has the most street cred. Yeah. Now, this building was purchased and then renovated and dedicated in the year 2005. And when they originally bought this property, many members were saying, do we need such a big property? Right? But it happened to be a good deal, and they eventually, by faith, they bought it and took it, right? And then it started to renovate it. And like I said, it was only within the last 10 years, especially the last 7, right? Even now, more and more members from China are coming to the point where the chapel on Sabbath is full. And it's not even all the members either, because a lot of the members, they live far away and they can't go to church on Sabbath. And they also have supermarkets, so they cannot go to Sabbath, right? Well, they made a choice not to go to Sabbath. So actually it turned out to be God's providence, even though they didn't know if they needed that much space or not. So for everything that we do in the church, we need to count on prayer, right? Ask God to guide our steps. Sometimes things don't make sense, but as long as we count on God, trust in the will of God, God will guide us. Right? God will guide us, and when we look back especially, that's when we see that God had wonderful providence for us. So here, this is the property that they are using. It's 3 stories. when I was staying, I actually stayed in the church for my 6 months there. And you can see, this is my window right here. There were 2 pastors' rooms, and this one became my room for 6 months. Up here, on the 3rd story, it's a lot of classrooms, and there's also a kind of a terrace for drying clothes. The chapel is inside here, if you go more deeply inside. I'll show you some pictures later. And then the lobby and dining area is in the 1st floor. So here, this is Preacher Chang from Taiwan. Was just sent there last year, and he has a 2-year term there. So at the end of this year, he'll be going back to Taiwan. This is the pulpit area that I wanted to show. This is the chapel. It looks very Taiwanese, like our churches in Taiwanese, because the pews were imported from Taiwan. Right? Yeah. And here is a picture of the dining area. We were having a Spanish-speaking Bible study at that time. Right? And then here's a library that's kind of to the side of the chapel. The chapel, if we were in this space, the chapel would be like over here. And here's the other pastor's room back here. And then my pastor room, the pastor room I stayed in, will be like here. Right. Okay. So before I go into the reason I was there, I would like to just briefly go over the church situation there and some of the members that I met. Right. When we arrived in January, it is the summertime there. Right. So during their summertime, they have vacation, and they also have an NYTS. So I'd like to show you a picture of their NYTS group photo. Only about 12, maybe 10 to 12 people, maybe 10 to 15 people if you include part-time. Right? Many of these people, some of them, they look really young, right? If you look at the back, especially the brothers. Right? This brother is only 21, and then this brother is like 20. This brother is like 19 or 20. He's like 24. Right? He's 34. Right? He's 32. And even though a lot of these mainline China brothers, they're very young, they're married. They have kids. Right? This brother has a kid and one on the way already. Right? And they usually own supermarkets. So all over Buenos Aires, when you go to one of these supermarkets, don't think of like a Safeway, or don't think like that big. Okay, think of more like it's not even bigger than CVS. You know, it's maybe half the size of CVS, like that. And so everywhere you go, almost everywhere you go to Buenos Aires, the Chinese community has taken over this supermarket market, right? You go in, and they're basically going to be someone from China there. Even the supermarket near the church, it's not our members, but it's Chinese people, right? So they usually, at age 21, or even earlier, they already are married, they already have kids, they already own a store, right? Are they mature or what? Very mature, right? And it kind of expanded my mind too about maturity, right? Some of these, like I'll show a picture later of another brother. He's only 28. He's a council member. He has 4 kids. Right? He has 4 kids, and he's doing a really good job. He owns a store too, or maybe two supermarkets, right? So don't let your age limit, or don't let your age tell you like what you cannot do. I'm not sure if that's coming out right. What I'm trying to say is, be as mature as you can. Don't do what society tells you, right? If society tells you in college, like it's a time to play, to explore, to not have responsibilities until you're in the real world, right? But that's the real world too. And it's good to mature for the sake of yourself and your future family, but also for the sake of the church. Okay. This elderly couple, they're from Chile, and they're over 70, but they made a trip over to attend the NYTS. They've been attending, from what I heard, for a couple years now. Right? And Brother Raymond, Preacher Raymond, was sent there too to help with Preacher Chang. I myself, because I was not assigned to do this particular seminar, I was sent there to study Spanish, but I just helped out with holy work wherever I could. So during this NYTS, I helped out with a couple prayer sessions. This is Deacon Chen. If anybody have been to Philadelphia and met Sister Anna Yang, this is her father. He's Deacon Chen. Yeah. Okay. Here's some other Argentina members. This is during the baptism in January. After the NYTS, there was a spiritual convocation, and during that time, there were about 10 people baptized, mostly babies and a couple of adults. This is the brother who's 28 and has 4 kids. And then this is his baby who was baptized that day. And if you were from Queens, if you know Brother Federico, this is his father, his Deacon Wang. Right? And this is his mother. Yeah. And then here are a couple other brothers and sisters here too. Yeah. So in the church in Argentina, basically you could see 2 large demographics. One is the Taiwanese members who came earlier and have been there for several decades. And then you have the mainline Chinese members who immigrated more recently. Right? So here are a couple more pictures. This was like a youth type of seminar we were having. This is Deacon Kuo, and he owns a photography shop with his wife. Right? This is just visiting some members and hanging out here. Yeah. But you'll notice that when you go to Argentina church, there's these 2 major demographics, and a lot of what you'll notice too is the Taiwanese members, they do the bulk of the holy work too, right? The Chinese members, their faith, generally speaking, is a bit weaker, right? A lot of them, their focus is on earning money only, to be honest, right? So their attendance at Sabbath is not as good. Their understanding of the Bible doctrines may not be as good either, right? So actually, there's quite a lot of work to be done in Argentina to try to especially visit these members and then try to help them to have a more godly perspective on life and have godly value system. So the church divided the province into 7 regions, right? Here we have the capital, which is marked by the fan, and they divided the capital into 2 regions, capital A and then capital B. That's funny. And then we have the north region, the northwest, west, southwest, and south. Okay. And what I was very impressed with when I went there was the spirit of visitation by this core group of visitation team members, which included council members and other fervent members. There are 2 weeks, there are 2 Sundays of every single month. Okay, how do I say this? 2 Sundays of the month, the visitation teams will basically take the whole Sunday to visit just one region, right? The whole day, from 9 to almost 6, depending on how far it is, right? And so on each Sunday, 3 regions are visited. Okay, so in about a 3-month cycle, you'll visit, at least the pastor will be able to cycle through all 7 of these regions, right? And each of these visitation teams that goes to these three separate regions has at least a council member, and then at least 2 to 3 other fervent members to make contact with these church members who haven't been going to service. And usually we go and visit them in their supermarkets because that's where they are, even on Sunday. Right? And then usually we take them aside and maybe even go upstairs and then just talk to them, catch up with them, and then pray with them. Yes? Yeah. If you were to drive from the church to here, it's about an hour, right? About an hour. But if you were to drive from here to the members here, it could be like an hour and a half. And then I remember going to the south region too. That was like 2 hours. Yeah. So it actually takes the whole day. So like let's say we're visiting the south region. There's some members scattered like here. So we would first go here, visit a couple members here, and then go all the way over here to the last member. And then in the afternoon, have a family service with them, and then go back to church. Right? So the members are quite spread out. From a logistical point of view and a resource point of view, actually this is very wonderful for evangelism in the future, right? Because I could just see, in the next 10 years, hopefully a church could be established here, and here, right? But unfortunately, this is something we have to work on too with the members, because the members, to be honest, we have to pray for them, right? Their focus is on making money. It's not really on spreading the gospel just quite yet. Right? So this is a very large and very monumentous task to accomplish. And the Argentina church really could use our prayers, even though you might not have been there or have met them. Right? So I didn't take a lot of pictures on these visitations because I only went on these visitation trips about 4 times, 4 Sundays. And while I was there, I wasn't really taking pictures. But I did get 2. This one we were visiting, this is on the roof of a supermarket of this brother. Right? He's about my age. It's too bad you can't see the supermarket. This one is inside the supermarket. Right? So here are some visitation team members. And then there were some members here behind the deli section, right? The deli section. Usually the members, the husband and the wife, they run the supermarket, and usually they have maybe one more helper. And if they're really busy, they might also rent out their deli space or their fresh fruit space to locals to sell. These other pictures here are just when I was invited to have a meal with some members. Yeah, but these are just some members too. Yeah. Okay. Some of these here, some of them aren't baptized yet either. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Again, like I mentioned, the main purpose why I was there was to study Spanish for 6 months. So I'd like to now go into what I was doing there. Basically, I tried to pack my schedule as much as possible with opportunities to learn Spanish. Right? So I was every month I was there, I was going to classes in University of Buenos Aires. Right? Even before I went there, I already made a proposal to the USGA of this is the school that is pretty reputable. They have a program especially for foreigners, right? So this is their website. What language do you want to study? And they teach all kinds of languages, including Spanish for foreigners. And then from March to June, I also was able to attend a school called Lenguas Vivas, which means living languages. And then I also went to tutors. And then, of course, immersion really helps. And whenever I could, I tried to, if time permitted, I would assist with holy work. Yeah. So I'd like to I also didn't take many pictures at the university, but this is a picture I found online. This is like the front, the corner of the building. And the universities are in Buenos Aires. They aren't like the universities in the United States where you have like just one campus and all the buildings are together. In Buenos Aires, especially University of Buenos Aires, it's all over the place. And this department was called the Department of Philosophy and Humanities. And they have a group especially to teach foreign languages. So in the summertime, I took classes here for 15 hours a week. And then from March to June, which is the fall, I took classes there 8 hours a week, which was the max they had. Right? And they have 8 levels of classes. When I first got there, I took a test for checking my level. This is kind of the scene there. And even though I had studied Spanish 5 years in high school, I forgot a lot. And then I tested into level 2. Yeah. Also, before I went to Buenos Aires, the USGA purchased a software package for the TP students to learn languages, right? And I picked, of course, Spanish. And it was good review, but even when you finish those CDs, those DVDs, that isn't even level 2 in this school, yeah. So when I look back, if I had worked hard enough, probably I could have tested into level 3, but it was good actually to review all of that. Yeah. This is a picture I took from the 3rd floor, just looking down. Inside the building is actually quite beautiful. At least it would have been very beautiful about 80 years ago. And then because of lack of budgeting and maybe lack of funding, many of the classrooms are pretty worn down. Excuse me. Like I said, I went to another school too, Lenguas Vivas. I started taking classes there in March, and it's also 8 hours a week. And there were 5 levels of classes, and I started in level 4. Thank God I tested into level 4 because I had the 2 months of experience, and then I finished. Actually, I didn't quite finish level 5 because I come back early. But this is also some pictures inside. This is like the cafeteria area, and then this is the other parts of the school because included on the campus is a elementary school and high school. Okay. So during March through June, my schedule was quite packed. It was 16 hours of classes per week, and then also tutoring. So I went to see a tutor. This tutor was found by one of our deacons, was nearby the church. He happened to see her making copies in a photocopy shop of like teaching material. And it turns out that she is a translator, but also teaches languages. So I went to see Christina maybe at most, maybe 3 hours a week, 3 times a week. And we would practice conversation, especially to increase my vocabulary. She would also tell me about the culture and then would introduce Argentine literature to me too. And then I also went to see Brother Roberto. He is a tuena. He does acupressure massage. And I would go to his clinic once a week for about an hour and a half. And then apart from that, during the week, we would Skype for an hour too. And the purpose with him was to read the Spanish Bible and then practice talking about the faith in Spanish. Because, I mean, if you just go to classes, there's a lot of vocabulary you don't get to, that they won't teach, that we need in the Bible, right? Like baptism, right? Like doctrines, things like that. And then, of course, just living there is an experience. Right? Let me just show you some pictures. Right? On the top left, this is something that, anybody seen this before? Okay, some people know, right? This is yerba mate, which is a type of, you could say tea. It's a type of plant that they grind up, and put it simply, it's like green tea on steroids. Right? It's very strong, and they use a metal type of straw/filter called a bombilla to drink it. It's hot, right? So almost everywhere you see in Buenos Aires, people will be either holding some kind of a thermos pack with a mate, or they have a thermos here because they're going to be drinking mate later. And it's a very social thing. They will usually, if you correct me if I'm wrong, or you can ask Pablo later too, right? What I understand is that, like maybe at work, if you're like it's break time, people will be hanging out, and then there will be one guy serving the mate, and everybody shares from this mate and also the straw. And you take your part, right? You finish it, and you pass it back to the guy who has the thermos, and then he pours it, and then you pass it to the next guy. And it's kind of like a social thing to catch up and socialize. Right? Also, empanadas are really popular there, and Argentina is known for their beef. Right? This is a cut of beef called asado. And then one thing I really liked in Argentina was this is called choripan, which is sausage in bread. It's really good. So one of the things that we had to do there, my wife and I, was you have to survive, right? So you have to go to buy vegetables, you have to go to the meat market, and this was all good practice to practice Spanish, right? There's some embarrassing mistakes that I had too, but I won't share them. Of course, when you first go to a new city, you explore too. So this is the pink house I was talking about. These are some of the landmarks. This is a theater, a very famous theater called Teatro Colón. And then here's an obelisk. It looks like Washington, D.C., very similar, and kind of like in the downtown area, right in the middle of the widest avenue in the whole world. It takes like two or three times to cross the whole street because of the red lights, yeah. And then here's just kind of a scene in the downtown area in the downtown area. Some other pictures. This is a neighborhood called La Boca. This is very touristy, actually. And then this is San Telmo, a neighborhood towards kind of the south of the capital, in the south. It's still in the capital, but towards the south a little bit. That's known for tango. And then here is the obelisk, a flag, and then I think it's a medical office building with an image of Evita Perón. And then here is a picture of the Congress building. Okay. Also, towards the end of my trip there, the World Cup started. So one day between my class in UBA and Lenguas Vivas, I was walking by, and I heard that they were doing outdoor projections of the games. So there was a game between Argentina and Nigeria, and this kind of captures the mood there. For me, I was really happy I got this video too, because everybody know Messi? Okay, everyone's heard Messi now, right? He was taking a free kick, and I had a feeling that it was going to go in. So I started recording. So there's probably a crowd of 5,000 there. And to me, it kind of reminds me of the scene where Jesus fed the 5,000. Because I'm thinking it was like on a slope. Jesus was, I can kind of imagine. Yeah. But here, everyone was feeding on football. Okay. One thing I learned there is that Spanish is very regionalized. Right? There's a verse in the Bible talking about how Aramaic was actually quite regionalized too. It says, "And a little later, those who stood by said to Peter again, 'Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean, and your speech shows it.'" Right? What I read from a book outside of the Bible was that Aramaic might have had like 7 accents. Right? And if you're from Galilee, your accent was pretty obvious. Okay? I forgot why. Something to do with some vowels or something. And in Spanish in Argentina is very different too. How many of us have taken Spanish at least maybe a year in high school or? Okay, so you probably will understand this when I tell you. This is kind of a picture to just encapsulate the whole thing too. In Argentina, they like to use vos, which means you. Yeah. Instead of using tú, they like to use vos. Not vosotros. Vosotros is you plural, but vos is you singular. Okay. And then the conjugation is very different. Okay. So a couple things, and you could always talk to Pablo too. They like to use vos, which is, there's a name in, I think, linguistics. They give it voseo, right? And then the Spanish you might have learned in the US and maybe Canada or elsewhere, you probably learn the eye and y sounds as ye or j, right? Like yo or yo, right? But in Rio Platense Spanish or Castellano, it's a sh sound. So you might normally say Castellano, but it's Castellano there. Right? Or you might say Me llamo Samuel, normally, when you learn in class, but there's Me llamo Samuel. So when I first got there, I was always like 2-3 steps behind because when I was trying to hear the Spanish and I heard a sh, I was thinking of SH, but then actually it was an eye or a y, right? And then once I recognized, oh, and then I'm already behind already. Also, in terms of daily conversation, they don't like to use the perfect tense, which is you use the present tense of the verb haber, and then the participle, the past participle, which is like, if you want to say, I have seen, normally you would say, he visto, right? He visto. But in Castellano, in Argentina, they would just say, vi, I saw. Yeah, I saw, yeah. Okay. So it's very interesting to learn Spanish there. At first, I didn't really like it because it was so different from what I learned. But at the end of the 6 months, I really appreciated to learn this type of Spanish and kind of just to expand my understanding of the Spanish-speaking world a little bit more. Argentina is probably the country that's most famous for using voseo, but there's a lot of other countries too, I learned. Countries like Guatemala, and then even some like Uruguay too, because they're neighbors. And other countries too have populations that do use this type of Spanish. Also, when you conjugate in voseo, it's actually easier than tú to me. Now that I learned it, it's easier. Yeah. Okay, so I think I'll probably have to end here due to time. Anybody have any questions on the Spanish? Yes. The weather in Buenos Aires, when I went there in January and February, they were telling me that it was the hottest summer in the last 40 years. It was about like, one day it got to like 42 degrees Celsius, which is like over 100. Maybe that was the real field temperature. I'm not sure. But it was so hot this summer that people were using their air conditioning a lot, which uses a lot of electricity. So there are a lot of power outages throughout the city this summer, and then people were doing demonstrations in the city. Right? This is in Latin America. I think people like to demonstrate a lot, right, against the government. So they were like blocked off the whole road, and then they're like marching and like had a fire there, and they're saying like, we want light, right? So it was really hot there, and then by the time I left in June, it was probably getting to about, the temperature high was about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But because it's humid there, you feel the cold a little more. You feel the cold, yeah. So it felt more like 40. Yeah. Any other questions, Jeffrey? Yeah. I'll show you tomorrow about some progress I've made. Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm fluent. I would say more I'm conversational. Yeah. Still working on it. And so I encourage you, if you want to, you can always practice with me in Spanish. I feel like since leaving there and leaving Dominican Republic, I've been kind of losing my Spanish too. Any other questions? Yes. In the church, they would preach in Mandarin Chinese, and then they would interpret into Spanish. Yeah. In terms of the membership, there are only a handful of you could say, members of European Latino descent. Only a handful, yeah. So that's also a area that needs a lot of work too. Right. Okay, so let us prepare for the Sabbath day now, and I'll finish this presentation and Dominican Republic tomorrow at this time. Let's now conclude with the silent prayer. Amen. Can we lower the microphones? I'm going to pull out the